The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Thousands of lights shone across the enormous hall. Representatives from hundreds of worlds sat in their assigned seats. Some had scales. Some had fur. Some looked like living machines. Others were made of energy contained inside floating suits. But despite their differences, they all shared the same fear. The Zorth Dominion was coming. For over 300 years, the Dominion had expanded across the galaxy. Wherever its fleets appeared, planets surrendered. Those who resisted disappeared. Entire civilizations had vanished from the star maps. Now the Dominion was moving toward Council space. A massive hologram floated above the center of the chamber. Red markers showed the locations of Dominion fleets. Every day, the red markers moved closer. Council Speaker Varnak stood before the assembly. His silver scales reflected the light of the hologram. "We are running out of options," he said. His voice echoed through the giant hall. The Dominion fleet now controls 12 star systems. Their forces continue to advance. A wave of nervous whispers spread through the chamber. Everyone knew the truth. No one could stop the Dominion. At least, that was what they believed. The military strength of the Dominion exceeds every known power. Varnak continued. "If we fight alone, we will lose." Several representatives lowered their heads. Others looked away. The fear was impossible to hide. Then one delegate stood. It was Ambassador Trell from the powerful Norix Empire. "We should negotiate," he said. Many representatives nodded immediately. Trell continued. "We cannot win. We should offer resources, territory, whatever they demand." Some leaders agreed. Others looked angry. But nobody offered a better solution. Near the back of the chamber sat a representative that few people paid attention to, the human ambassador. Ambassador Sarah Mitchell sat quietly while the debate continued. Unlike many of the other delegates, she showed little emotion. Several representatives glanced toward her and laughed quietly. Humans were still considered newcomers. Compared to ancient galactic civilizations, humanity was young, weak, unimportant. At least, that was a common opinion. One delegate finally pointed toward Sarah. "What does Earth think?" he asked with a grin. A few representatives chuckled. Another joined in. "Perhaps the humans can throw rocks at the Dominion." More laughter followed. Sarah remained calm. She simply folded her hands and watched. The council speaker looked uncomfortable. "Humanity may speak if it wishes." Sarah stood. The room slowly became quieter. "We believe surrender is a mistake," she said. Several delegates rolled their eyes. One representative laughed openly. "And what exactly will humans do?" he asked. Sarah looked directly at him. "We will fight." The chamber exploded with laughter. Even some military advisors smiled. Fight? Humanity? Against the Dominion? It sounded ridiculous. The laughter lasted almost a minute. Sarah waited patiently. Eventually the room settled down. The representative shook his head. "You do not understand the scale of this threat." "Perhaps," Sarah replied. The delegate smirked. "No, you definitely do not." Before Sarah could answer, alarms suddenly echoed through the chamber. Every conversation stopped instantly. Red warning lights flashed across the walls. Military officers rushed toward their stations. The giant hologram above the room flickered. "What is happening?" Varnak demanded. A sensor officer appeared on the central display. His face looked pale. "Speaker, we have detected a massive fleet entering the sector." The room froze. A fleet? At this moment, fear spread immediately. Several delegates stood from their seats. Others began speaking at once. "The Dominion! They found us! We're too late!" The chamber filled with panic. Varnak raised his voice. "Silence!" Slowly the noise faded. The censor officer swallowed hard. "The fleet emerged from hyperspace less than 20 minutes ago." "Size?" Varnak asked. The officer hesitated. That hesitation made everyone even more nervous. Finally he answered. "We cannot determine the exact number." A cold feeling swept through the room. The Dominion fleet had to be enormous. Otherwise the censors would have counted it already. "Estimate?" Varnak asked. The officer looked at his screen. His eyes widened. "Millions." The chamber became completely silent. "Millions?" That was impossible. No civilization possessed millions of warships. No civilization. The hologram suddenly changed. A new image appeared above the chamber. Gasps echoed everywhere. Ships, endless ships. The display stretched so far that the hologram had trouble rendering them all. Rows upon rows of vessels filled the projection. Battleships, carriers, cruisers, destroyers, support vessels, supply ships, thousands, then hundreds of thousands, then millions. Many delegates simply stared. Their minds struggled to process what they were seeing. One representative nearly collapsed into his chair. Another whispered a prayer. The council speaker looked speechless. If this is a dominion, someone muttered. Nobody finished a sentence, because everyone knew what it meant. If the Dominion possessed such a fleet, the war was already over. The censor officer suddenly spoke again. His voice trembled. There is additional information. Varnak looked at him. What information? The officer stared at the screen. Then he slowly looked up. The fleet has identified itself. The chamber held its breath. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody blinked. Then the officer delivered the message. It is not the Dominion. Confused murmurs spread through the hall. If not the Dominion, then who? The officer hesitated again. His expression looked almost unbelievable, as if he could not accept the answer himself. Finally he spoke. The fleet belongs to humanity. Silence. Absolute silence. No laughter. No whispers. No movement. Hundreds of alien leaders stared at the display. Then they slowly turned toward the human ambassador. Sarah Mitchell remained standing, calm, confident, as if none of this surprised her. The endless fleet continued to glow above the chamber. Millions of ships. An army hidden from the entire galaxy. An army nobody knew existed. The same representatives who had mocked humanity minutes earlier now looked terrified. One delegate finally found his voice. How? Another whispered. Where did all those ships come from? Sarah looked around the silent chamber. Every eye was fixed on her. Then she spoke the words that would soon echo across the galaxy. You asked if anyone could stop the Dominion. She paused. The hologram of humanity's vast fleet filled the room. Then she gave her answer. We believe we can. And for the first time in centuries, hope returned to the Galactic Council. But nobody knew the truth. The fleet they were seeing was only the beginning. The chamber remained silent long after Ambassador Sarah Mitchell finished speaking. No one laughed anymore. No one mocked humanity. Every representative was staring at the giant hologram above them. Millions of human ships filled the display. The sight was almost impossible to believe. For decades, the galaxy had viewed Earth as a minor civilization. Humans traded with other species, attended council meetings, and explored nearby sectors. They seemed ambitious, but not powerful. Now everything looked different. Council Speaker Varnak slowly stood. His eyes never left the hologram. Ambassador Mitchell, he said carefully, the council requires an explanation. Sarah nodded. That is understandable. A representative from the Norix Empire jumped to his feet. His face was filled with anger. Explanation? He shouted. We need more than an explanation. He pointed toward the display. You hid this from the entire galaxy. Several delegates agreed immediately. Others looked nervous. If humanity could secretly build such a force, what else had they hidden? Sarah remained calm. We did hide it, she admitted. The room erupted with whispers. The honesty surprised everyone. She continued before anyone could interrupt. But we did not build it to threaten the council. Then why build it? Another delegate demanded. Sarah looked around the chamber. Then she answered with a simple question. How many wars has your species survived? The delegates exchanged confused looks. Nobody understood her point. Sarah continued. Humans have spent most of their history preparing for dangers. A few representatives frowned. She walked toward the center of the chamber. When humanity first reached the stars, we studied galactic history. A new hologram appeared. Ancient civilizations flashed across the display. Some were familiar. Others had disappeared long ago. We noticed a pattern, Sarah said. The images changed. Several extinct civilizations appeared. Every civilization believed peace would last forever. The room grew quiet. Every civilization believed someone else would protect them. More images appeared. Destroyed worlds, burning cities, abandoned colonies, and every civilization that stopped preparing eventually faced a threat it could not survive. Nobody spoke. Sarah's voice remained steady. Humans learned a different lesson. The hologram changed again. This time it showed Earth, then Mars, then dozens of human colonies. We hoped for peace. The image expanded. Hundreds of colonies appeared, but we prepared for war. A military advisor stood. Prepared how? Sarah smiled slightly. The hologram zoomed outward. Gasps filled the room. Entire asteroid belts appeared. Massive industrial stations covered the rocks. Huge shipyards floated in deep space. Factory platforms stretched for hundreds of kilometers. The delegates stared in shock. Some structures were larger than cities. Those facilities have existed for over a century, Sarah explained. What? Someone whispered. Sarah nodded. Many were built in regions nobody monitored. The display changed again. Now giant mining operations appeared inside distant systems. Automated machines harvested resources around the clock. Millions of robots worked continuously. No breaks. No holidays. No delays. Year after year. Decade after decade. A representative from the Kalari Union looked horrified. You built all of this in secret? Not entirely in secret, Sarah replied. The delegate blinked. What do you mean? Sarah touched the console. Old council records appeared. Thousands of reports filled the screen. Meeting transcripts, security warnings, threat assessments, risk evaluations. The dates stretch back decades. We submitted warnings many times. Council members began reading the records. Their expressions slowly changed. Sarah was right. Human diplomats had repeatedly warned about future threats. Again and again, year after year. Most reports had been ignored. Others had been delayed. Some were never discussed at all. The room became uncomfortable. Nobody wanted to admit it. Humanity had seen danger coming long before anyone else. And nobody had listened. We were not predicting the Dominion specifically, Sarah explained. We simply believed that eventually something dangerous would appear. The Norix delegate crosses arms. So you built the largest military force in galactic history? Sarah looked directly at him. Would you prefer that we had not? The delegate had no answer. For several seconds he stood there silently. Then he sat down. Across the chamber, many leaders were asking themselves the same question. Without humanity's fleet, what chance did they have? Probably none. The council speaker cleared his throat. How many ships do you actually possess? Sarah hesitated. That hesitation immediately worried everyone. Finally, she answered. The fleet currently visible represents only our active defense force. Several delegates looked confused. Active defense force? Sarah nodded. Yes. A military officer suddenly looked alarmed. Wait. He stared at her. Are you saying that fleet is not your entire military? Sarah answered. No. The chamber exploded with noise. Representatives began shouting questions. Military advisors rushed to their consoles. Several leaders looked completely stunned. Millions of ships were only part humanity's military? The idea seemed impossible. The council speaker raised his voice. Order. Maintain order. Gradually the room became quiet again. Sarah spoke carefully. Humanity created multiple reserve fleets. The delegates stared. Reserve fleets. Yes. How many? Sarah gave a small smile. Enough. The answer somehow felt even more frightening. Before anyone could ask another question, alarms suddenly sounded again. This time they were even louder. The room instantly fell silent. Everyone turned toward the central display. A new officer appeared. His face looked pale. Very pale. Speaker Varnak, we have urgent intelligence. The council speaker stepped forward. Report. The officer took a deep breath. The Dominion has accelerated its invasion schedule. Fear returned immediately. The hologram changed. A massive formation of red markers appeared, even larger than before. The Dominion fleet was moving. Fast. Much faster than expected. Several border systems flashed red. Then more. Then more. Their advance forces crossed the frontier 3 hours ago, the officer said. Gasps echoed through the chamber. 3 hours? That meant the invasion had already begun. The officer continued. Current projections estimate first contact within 4 days. The room became silent once again. For days. That was all they had left. For days before the greatest war in galactic history began. All eyes slowly turned toward Ambassador Sarah Mitchell. For the first time, nobody saw humanity as weak. Nobody saw humanity as inexperienced. Nobody saw humanity as unimportant. Now they saw something else. Their only chance. Sarah looked at the red Dominion markers, then at the enormous human fleet. Her expression never changed. She already knew what came next, because humanity had been preparing for this moment for generations. And somewhere beyond the frontier, the first human battle fleets were already moving toward the enemy. The war that would decide the future of the galaxy had finally begun. For days later, the frontier world of Archon 7 waited in fear. The planet was small compared to the great worlds of the Galactic Council, but nearly 2 billion civilians lived there. Its cities stretched across vast oceans and green continents. For generations, it had been a peaceful trading world. Now it stood directly in the path of the Zorith Dominion. Across the planet, emergency sirens echoed through the skies. Families rushed toward evacuation centers. Transport ships lifted off every minute. Spaceports were packed with frightened civilians. Nobody knew if they would ever see their homes again. Far above the planet, defense stations floated silently in orbit. Their commanders watched the tactical displays with growing concern. The enemy was coming, fast. Inside the main command center, Governor Reland stared at the sensor screen. Red markers were appearing one after another. Each marker represented a Dominion warship. There were thousands, then tens of thousands. The numbers continued climbing. A young officer swallowed hard. Governor, they will arrive in less than 2 hours. Reland nodded slowly. The room felt cold. Everyone knew what Dominion invasions looked like. Cities burned. Governments collapsed. Entire populations vanished. The stories were known across the galaxy. Nobody wanted Archon 7 to become another one of those stories. Then a communication officer suddenly stood. We have an incoming transmission. Reland looked up. From who? The officer blinked. His eyes widened. Human command. The room instantly became quiet. The screen changed. A woman in a dark military uniform appeared. Her face looked calm despite the situation. I am Admiral Elena Reyes of the United Earth Fleet. Reland leaned forward. You have arrived? The Admiral nodded. My forces are already entering the system. The governor looked confused. Our sensors show no large fleet. A small smile appeared on Reyes' face. They will... The transmission ended. Several officers exchanged nervous looks. Nobody understood what she meant. Then the sensors began detecting new contacts. 1 ship, then 10, then 100, then thousands. The numbers exploded upward. Human ships poured into the system through hyperspace gates. Cruisers, destroyers, battleships, carriers. The sky filled with them. The defensive stations immediately cheered. For the first time since the crisis began, hope returned. Yet, when the final count appeared, many officers looked worried. The human fleet was large, but the Dominion fleet was larger, much larger. Governor Reland stared at the display. Can they really stop them? Nobody answered, because nobody knew. Hours later, the Dominion finally arrived. Space itself seemed to tear open. Massive warships emerged from hyperspace. Dark holes covered with weapons. Endless rows of battle cruisers. Heavy carriers. Planet killer platforms. The enemy fleet stretched across millions of kilometers. It looked unstoppable. On the flagship Iron Resolve, Admiral Reyes watched silently. Her officers studied the battlefield. No one looked afraid. One young commander spoke. Enemy numbers exceed projections. Reyes nodded. Good. The officer looked surprised. Good. The Admiral smiled slightly. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. Around the bridge, a few officers laughed. The tension eased. Then a transmission arrived. The face of the Dominion commander appeared. He was enormous, covered in black armor. His yellow eyes glowed with confidence. "I am Supreme Commander Korthak." His voice rumbled through the bridge. "You stand before the Dominion." Nobody spoke. Korthak smiled. "I expected resistance from the Council." His eyes narrowed. "I did not expect humans." Admiral Reyes crossed her arms. "Now you have." The Dominion commander laughed. A deep, powerful laugh. "You are brave." He leaned closer. But bravery is not enough. The transmission screen displayed the size of his fleet. The numbers were terrifying. Even some human officers looked impressed. Korthak grinned. "Surrender now." Reyes shook her head. "No." The commander laughed again. "Then your species will disappear." Reyes looked completely calm. "We hear that a lot." The transmission ended. A few seconds later, battle alarms filled the bridge. The war had begun. Thousands of Dominion ships accelerated forward. Energy weapons lit up the darkness. Missiles crossed space like rivers of fire. The first attack slammed into human defenses. Several ships exploded instantly. Shock waves spread through the battlefield. On Archon 7, civilians watched from emergency shelters. The sky itself seemed alive with flashes of light. The battle had started. Inside the Dominion fleet, Commander Korthak watched confidently. His forces had crushed hundreds of civilizations. This battle would be no different. At least, that was what he believed. Then something strange happened. The humans refused to fight normally. Instead of forming a single battle line, their fleets split apart. Thousands of smaller groups moved independently. Every formation changed direction constantly. Every attack came from unexpected angles. Dominion targeting systems struggled to keep up. Korthak frowned. What are they doing? No one could answer. The human movements looked chaotic, random, unpredictable. Yet somehow every action supported another. Ships separated, then reunited, then attacked from entirely different positions. The battlefield became a giant puzzle, and the Dominion could not solve it. Hours passed. Dominion losses slowly increased, then increased again, then increased even more. Korthak's confidence began to disappear. Human fleets kept adapting. Whenever the Dominion found a weakness, humans changed tactics. Whenever a strategy worked, the humans evolved. It felt as if they were learning in real time. On the Iron Resolve, Admiral Reyes watched the reports. Phase 1 complete. An officer smiled. Enemy confusion rising. Good. Another officer looked up. Should we begin Phase 2? Reyes nodded. Let's surprise them. Seconds later, hidden human ships emerged from behind nearby moons and asteroids. Entire attack groups that had remained invisible suddenly joined the fight. The Dominion formation broke apart. Several command ships exploded. Communication networks failed. Confusion spread through enemy ranks. For the first time in centuries, Dominion officers were panicking. Commander Korthak slammed his fist against the console. Regroup. But it was already too late. The battlefield was slipping from his control. Human forces pushed harder. Wave after wave struck vulnerable targets. Supply ships vanished. Command relays were destroyed. Navigation systems failed. The Dominion fleet began falling back. At first, it was only a few ships, then hundreds, then thousands. Finally, the impossible happened. The Dominion fleet started retreating. Across the battlefield, stunned silence followed. Even human officers stared at the reports. Then cheering erupted across every channel. They had done it. The Dominion was retreating. On Archon 7, celebrations broke out instantly. People hugged strangers. Families cried tears of relief. The planet had survived. News spread across the galaxy within hours. Every major world received the same report. The Dominion had lost. Not a war, not the campaign, but a battle, their first major defeat in centuries. For billions of beings, it was enough. Hope returned. But deep inside Dominion territory, far from the celebrations, another figure studied the battle reports. He sat upon a black throne surrounded by stars. the emperor of the Dominion, the ruler of countless worlds, the most feared being in known space. He read every report carefully. Then he looked toward the image of the human fleet. For a long moment, he said nothing. Finally, he spoke. Interesting. His advisors remained silent. The emperor slowly stood. Commander Korthak underestimated them. He turned toward the darkness beyond the throne room. That mistake will not happen again. A massive hidden fleet appeared on a nearby hologram. The ships were larger than anything seen at Archon 7, deadlier, stronger, built only for conquest. The Emperor smiled. Prepare the Eternal Fleet. Even his advisors looked nervous, because throughout Dominion history, the Eternal Fleet had never been defeated, not once, and now it was heading directly toward humanity. The celebration across the galaxy did not last long. Yes, humanity had won the first battle. Yes, Archon 7 had survived. And yes, the Dominion had retreated. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. The war was only beginning. Inside the Galactic Council, emergency meetings continued day and night. Military officers rushed through hallways carrying reports. Diplomats argued constantly. News channels broadcast updates every hour. The entire galaxy was holding its breath. Then a message arrived from Human Intelligence Command. The message carried the highest possible security clearance. Only senior leaders were allowed to view it. Council Speaker Varnak stared at the warning symbol on the screen. "What is this?" he asked. A human officer answered through the communication link. "Evidence." "Evidence of what?" The officer's face became serious. "The real Dominion." Minutes later, the council chamber filled with representatives. The giant holographic display activated. Everyone expected military reports, enemy fleet positions, battle projections, supply estimates. Instead, they saw something much worse. An ancient star system appeared on the screen. The system looked normal at first. Several planets, a yellow star, signs of civilization. Then the image changed. The planets vanished. Every single one. Only broken debris remained. The room became silent. A delegate finally spoke. "What happened there?" The human officer answered. "The Dominion." More images appeared. Another destroyed civilization. Then another. Then another. Hundreds of them. Entire species erased from history. Some civilizations had once controlled dozens of star systems. Others had been peaceful scientific societies. None survived. The room grew colder with every image. One representative slowly stood. "These records cannot be real." The officer looked at him. "We verified them through multiple sources." The delegate shook his head. No empire could hide crimes on this scale. The officer touched the control panel. The display changed again. This time, ancient Dominion records appeared. Military orders, invasion plans, population reports, extermination commands. The evidence was overwhelming. A terrible truth emerged. The Dominion had not simply conquered worlds. It had erased them. Whenever a civilization resisted too strongly, it disappeared completely. Its history vanished. Its culture vanished. Its people vanished, as if they had never existed. Gasps spread throughout the chamber. Some delegates looked sick. Others looked angry. One elderly representative lowered his head. His species had always believed their ancient neighbors mysteriously vanished thousands of years ago. Now he knew the truth. The Dominion had murdered them. Council Speaker Varnak clenched his fists. "How many?" The human officer understood the question. He looked down briefly before answering. "Our estimate is over 3,000 civilizations." The chamber exploded with shock. 3,000. The number was almost impossible to imagine. Entire histories erased. Entire peoples lost forever. Silence returned. Nobody knew what to say. For generations, many leaders believed surrender was a possible solution. Now they understood. There would be no surrender, no negotiation, no compromise. The Dominion did not want partners. It wanted obedience, and eventually extinction. Meanwhile, thousands of light years away, another problem was growing. Human reconnaissance fleets had begun tracking unusual enemy movements. At first, the reports seemed minor. a missing patrol, an unexpected transmission, a hidden supply route. Then the pattern became clear. Something massive was moving through Dominion territory. Something far larger than the fleet defeated at Archon 7. Inside the command center of Earth's defense network, Admiral Elena Reyes studied the incoming reports. Her officers stood around a giant tactical map. Nobody looked comfortable. A young analyst finally broke the silence. "We have confirmation." Reyes looked up. "The Eternal Fleet?" The analyst nodded. "Yes." The room became quiet. Even experienced officers exchanged nervous glances. The Eternal Fleet was becoming a legend already. Every captured Dominion record described the same thing: an elite force, a fleet reserved only for the most important wars, a fleet that had never suffered defeat. Not once. Reyes stared at the tactical display. Numbers? The analyst swallowed. Still uncertain. Estimate. The officer hesitated, then answered, possibly 3 times larger than the force at Archon 7. Several people cursed quietly. The room suddenly felt much smaller. 3 times larger. The previous fleet had nearly overwhelmed an entire sector. This new force could threaten dozens of systems simultaneously. Another officer looked toward Reyes. "What do we do?" The admiral answered immediately. "We prepare." Elsewhere across the galaxy, panic was spreading. News of the Eternal Fleet reached civilian populations. Fear returned. Some worlds began emergency evacuations. Others discussed surrender. Several governments openly questioned whether continuing the war was worth the risk. Inside the council chamber, arguments became more heated every day. One representative slammed his fist against a desk. "We should negotiate while we still can." Another immediately stood. "Negotiate what? Our own extinction." The debate intensified. Voices rose. Accusations flew across the room. For the first time since the war began, unity was breaking apart. Then the chamber doors opened. Ambassador Sarah Mitchell entered. The room gradually became quiet. She walked toward the center of the chamber. No dramatic speech. No anger. No fear. Just calm confidence. A representative pointed toward her. "The Dominion is sending its greatest fleet." Sarah nodded. "We know." "And you still want to fight?" "Yes." The delegate stared at her. "Why?" Sarah looked around the room. Then she activated a hologram. Gasps echoed immediately. Millions of human ships appeared. The same fleet shown weeks earlier. But then the image expanded. And expanded again. And expanded again. New fleets appeared. Then more. Then even more. The delegate stared in disbelief. Someone whispered, "Impossible." Sarah spoke calmly. "The fleet you saw before was only our active defense force." Nobody moved. Nobody even blinked. The display continued expanding. Reserve fleets filled the hologram. Hidden fleets. Deep space fleets. Colonial defense fleets. Rapid response fleets. Entire armadas that had never been revealed. The numbers became difficult to comprehend. One military advisor slowly sat down. His legs could no longer support him. A representative looked at Sarah. "How long have you been preparing?" Sarah thought for a moment, then answered, "Generations." Across the chamber, fear slowly transformed into something else. Hope. For the first time since the war began, people started believing victory might actually be possible. But Sarah was not finished. She touched another control. The hologram changed once more. Now every human colony appeared. Earth, Mars, Titan, hundreds of settlements, thousands of stations, millions of factories. Every single one was highlighted. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer preparing for war. Humanity had fully entered it. Every colony, every worker, every shipyard, every citizen, all moving toward the same goal: victory. Sarah looked around the silent chamber. The Dominion believes fear will divide us. Nobody spoke. The Dominion believes we will surrender. The representatives listened carefully. Sarah's voice became firm. They are wrong. Across the galaxy, hidden shipyards activated. New warships left dry docks. Factories doubled production. Supply convoys launched toward the front lines. Humanity was mobilizing on a scale never seen before. And far beyond the frontier, in the darkness between stars, the Eternal Fleet continued its advance. System after system reported the same terrifying sight: endless black warships, countless weapons, an army built for conquest. The final battle was coming, and this time the fate of the entire galaxy would be decided, because the Eternal Fleet was heading straight toward the heart of the war, and humanity was waiting for it. The space between stars had never felt so heavy. Every faction in the galaxy was watching the same point on the map, the Varelian Expanse, a massive empty region of space between Council territory and Dominion core systems. It was here that everything would be decided. The Eternal Fleet was coming, and humanity was waiting. On the human flagship, UNS Resolve, Admiral Elena Reyes stood in front of the main tactical display. The bridge was silent except for soft system alarms and steady breathing of the crew. No one spoke loudly anymore, not since they saw the enemy signal. A young officer finally broke the silence. Admiral, enemy fleet confirmed. Reyes nodded. How many? The officer hesitated, then answered, too many to count. A map expanded across the display. Dark shapes filled the screen. Then more appeared. Then even more. The Eternal Fleet was not just large. It was overwhelming. It stretched across light seconds of space like a moving wall of death. Each ship was larger than standard Dominion warships, each one armed with weapons capable of destroying cities in a single strike. One human analyst whispered, "This is not a fleet. This is a judgment." Reyes did not react. She only watched. Then she spoke. "Signal all human fleets." Instantly, messages spread across thousands of channels. Hidden fleets activated. Colonial defense groups mobilized. Deep space units changed course. For the first time, every human military asset was moving together. Across the battlefield, Dominion Supreme Commander Korthak observed from his flagship. Even he looked different now, less confident, more careful. He stared at the incoming human formations. "They are organized," he muttered. A subordinate replied nervously, "Sir, their numbers are increasing every minute." Korthak frowned. "That is impossible." But it was not. Human fleets were emerging from every direction, from behind moons, from inside asteroid belts, from hidden jump points. The Dominion had expected resistance, but not preparation on this scale. On Archon 7, civilians watched a live galactic broadcast. The sky above the planet showed the entire battlefield in real time. Children held their parents tightly. Elders whispered prayers. Everyone knew this battle would decide everything. Then the Eternal Fleet arrived. Space bent slightly as the massive formation emerged. It was not a normal arrival. It was domination. Thousands of ships entered formation instantly. Perfect alignment. Perfect discipline. No hesitation. No weakness. Korthak's eyes narrowed. "Now," he said quietly. The Eternal Fleet advanced, and the battle began. The first strike came from the Dominion. Energy beams so powerful they lit up entire sectors of space. Human forward ships exploded instantly. Shock waves spread through the formation. On the human bridge, alarms screamed. Shields at 60%. Multiple hull breaches. Enemy fire intensifying. Reyes remained calm. Hold formation. Another explosion shook the ship. An officer shouted, "Admiral, we are taking heavy losses." Reyes finally turned. Expected. Then she looked at the display. Begin Phase 1. Across the battlefield, something changed. Human fleets stopped retreating. They stopped reacting. And they started adapting. The Eternal Fleet advanced again. This time faster. Their strategy was simple. Crush everything in front of them. But humans were no longer in front of them. They were everywhere. Small human strike groups moved between massive enemy formations. Fast, precise, unpredictable. Dominion targeting systems struggled. Every time they locked onto a human ship, it was already gone. Every time they predicted movement, it changed. Korthak growled, "Why can't they be tracked?" A tactical officer answered, "They are not following patterns, sir." "What do you mean?" They're changing patterns as we analyze them. Korthak's expression hardened. That is not possible in real-time combat. But it was happening. Human AI systems were learning directly from enemy fire. Every shot fired by the Dominion made humans stronger. Every movement revealed a weakness. On the UNS Resolve, Reyes watched silently. Phase 2. Suddenly, hidden human fleets activated across the battlefield. Ships that had been waiting in deep silence. Entire armadas emerged from behind gravitational shadows. They struck the Eternal Fleet from multiple directions at once. The battlefield lit up with destruction. Even Dominion formations began to break. Not collapse, but crack. For the first time, the Eternal Fleet slowed. On Archon 7, observers gasped. They are stopping them. A military analyst shook his head. No, not stopping. He looked closer. Disrupting. Because the Eternal Fleet was still powerful, still massive, still dangerous, but no longer unstoppable. Korthak slammed his console. Regroup all fleets. But communication lines were breaking. Human sabotage units had already infiltrated deep systems. Entire command chains were failing. Confusion spread through Dominion ranks. And confusion was something they had never experienced before. Reyes watched everything carefully. Then she gave the final order. Begin Phase 3. The deepest secret of humanity was revealed. Not a weapon, not a ship, but coordination. Every human fleet across the galaxy synchronized. Not just military. Civilian shipyards, mining stations, colony defense networks, even scientific vessels. All systems became part of a single unified strategy. The battlefield transformed. Humanity was no longer fighting as a species. It was fighting as one organism. The Eternal Fleet tried to push forward again, but now every movement was predicted, every attack countered, every advantage neutralized. Slowly, impossibly, the Eternal Fleet began to lose ground. Not quickly, not dramatically, but steadily. Korthak realized something terrifying. This is not a battle. His voice lowered. This is learning. Humanity was not just fighting. It was understanding the enemy in real time, adapting faster than any known civilization, improving during combat itself. On Archon 7, hope turned into disbelief. They're actually pushing them back. An old officer whispered, "This cannot be happening." But it was. The Eternal Fleet, the unstoppable force of the Dominion, was retreating. Step by step, ship by ship, system by system. And at the center of it all, Admiral Reyes watched without emotion, because she knew something no one else fully understood yet. This battle was not the end. It was only the moment the galaxy realized humanity had stopped surviving and started winning. Far away, deep inside Dominion core space, the Emperor watched the reports in silence. For the first time in centuries, he did not speak. He only stared at the name flashing across every screen. Humanity. And he finally understood. The war was no longer under his control. The battlefield fell into an unnatural silence after the Eternal Fleet began to retreat. Not complete silence. Weapons still fired. Ships still burned. But something had changed in the rhythm of the war. The unstoppable force of the Dominion was no longer unstoppable. And everyone knew it. On the UNS Resolve, Admiral Elena Reyes stood motionless as reports flooded in from every sector. Enemy formations breaking, supply lines collapsing, command chains failing. The Eternal Fleet, once believed to be invincible, was pulling back in structured retreat. Not chaos, but retreat, a control withdrawal. That made it even more dangerous. A young officer looked at the Admiral. "Ma'am, they're reorganizing." Reyes nodded slowly. "Yes." Another officer spoke. "If they regroup, they may come back stronger." Reyes did not answer immediately. She watched the hologram of the battlefield, then said, "Let them try." Far across the battlefield, Supreme Commander Korthak stood inside his damaged flagship. The bridge around him was burning in places. Alarm screamed. Officers shouted reports. But Korthak did not react. His eyes were fixed on the tactical display. For the first time in his entire life, He had lost control of the battle. Not fully defeated, but outplayed. Slowly he spoke. Report casualties. A subordinate hesitated. Severe losses, Commander. How severe? Silence. Then the answer came. 37% of Eternal Fleet combat strength is non-operational. A heavy silence followed. Korthak closed his eyes. 37%. In Dominion history, the Eternal Fleet had never lost even 5% in a single engagement. Now it had lost more than a third, and it was still retreating. He opened his eyes again. Human casualties? Another pause, lower than expected. That answer disturbed him more than anything else, because it meant one thing. Humanity was not just surviving, it was winning efficiently. Across the galaxy, the news spread faster than light. Council worlds received the reports. Civilian populations watched live feeds. Entire governments froze. The Dominion Eternal Fleet had been pushed back by humans. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, silence returned once again. But this silence was different from the first meeting. It was not disbelief, not fear. It was understanding. Council Speaker Varnak stood slowly. His voice was low. So it is true. No one responded, because there was nothing left to deny. The Dominion was not unbeatable. Humanity was not weak. And the galaxy had misjudged everything. Then the doors opened. Ambassador Sarah Mitchell entered. She walked to the center as always. Calm, steady, unshaken. A representative immediately stood. Is it over? Sarah looked at him. No. That single word froze the room. Another delegate spoke quickly. But the Eternal Fleet is retreating. Sarah nodded. Yes. Then we have won. Sarah shook her head slightly. We have survived a phase. Silence followed. She continued. The Dominion does not lose wars because of one defeat. Her voice became firmer. It adapts. It escalates. A nervous murmur spread through the chamber. Sarah activated a new hologram. The display changed. Far beyond the battlefield, deep inside Dominion space, something massive was moving, even larger than the Eternal Fleet. Heavily guarded, hidden, a new formation began to appear. A fleet surrounded by darkness markers. Unknown classification. High energy signatures. Extreme gravitational distortion fields. A scientist in the chamber whispered, "What is that?" Sarah answered quietly, "The Dominion Corps Armadas." The room grew cold. A military commander stepped forward. "There are more fleets?" Sarah nodded. "Yes." A pause. Then she added the words that changed everything. "And they are not built for war." The commander frowned. Were they built for then? Sarah looked at the hologram. For ending wars. The chamber erupted in panic. Council members shouted questions. Some demanded evacuation plans. Others argued for surrender negotiations. But Sarah raised her hand. The room slowly quieted. "We are not losing," she said. "We are entering the real war." Far away, in Dominion core space, the Emperor stood alone inside his dark throne chamber. The Eternal Fleet reports floated before him. Losses, retreats, human counter-strategies. He read everything, slowly, carefully. Then he spoke. Summon the Corps Armadas. His advisors hesitated. Even they feared what that meant, because the Corps Armadas were not just military fleets. They were the Dominion's final solution, a force designed for total domination of reality itself, not just to win battles, but to erase resistance entirely. As the order was transmitted, the Emperor looked at the stars beyond his throne, and for the first time, he felt something unfamiliar, uncertainty. Back on the UNS Resolve, Admiral Reyes received the same intelligence. She studied the incoming data, then closed it. An officer looked at her. "Admiral, what now?" Reyes turned toward the window of the bridge. Outside, countless human fleets were reforming, repairing, rearming, preparing. She answered calmly. Now they stopped holding back. Across human space, every shipyard increased production. Every colony activated defense protocols. Every fleet received final combat authorization. No more reserves. No more hidden strength. Everything was now in motion. The war had reached its final stage. On Archon 7, civilians watched the sky. For a moment, it looked peaceful again, but the soldiers knew better. Peace was not returning. It was being prepared for. Because somewhere beyond the stars, the core armadas were moving, and humanity was not waiting anymore. It was advancing to meet them. The Galactic Council sat in complete silence, not because they had nothing to say, but because they finally understood the truth. This was no longer a war for survival. It was a war for the future of the galaxy itself. And humanity was no longer an unknown force. It had become the deciding one.